Dreamers Awake, Chapter 6. Lydia parted ways with her new girlfriends as soon as the bus arrived at school the next day. She managed to find Tyler quickly. He was sitting on some concrete benches near the gym with a small group of friends. "Hi, Tyler," she said as she walked toward him. "Hey," he replied. "So I talked to my aunt, and she's totally fine with us meeting after school today," Lydia said casually. "Okay, cool. We can walk over to the library after English." Tyler's friends chuckled and elbowed each other. Lydia wasn't surprised by their reaction, but still felt a small amount of insecurity that she tried desperately to quash. "Great, see you then." She turned in what she hoped appeared a confident way and went to join Wendy, Shamir, and Michelle. The school day seemed to drag by for Lydia. She watched the minutes tick by slowly on her watch and mindlessly followed along with what they were doing in class. She had had more dreams last night, bad ones, filled with an echoing of, "You're not me." At least it wasn't shouted this time, but she wasn't sure if the constant whispering was better or worse. Just when she thought it was done, another whisper would begin, and it drove Lydia mad. Being awake and staring into the darkness had been preferable to falling asleep, but she couldn't avoid it altogether. Michelle had commented on her haggard appearance on the bus and had smirked. "Isn't today the day you're doing your study date with Tyler?" she had sneered. Lydia had brushed the comment off, but it still bothered her that Michelle was so snippy with her. What was her deal anyway? It couldn't be just that she was mad about Tyler, because she'd been a bitch before they had even met. Wendy had said she was just like that. Lydia sighed and tried to focus on her teacher. What class was she even in? She wasn't tracking well today at all. She glanced at the board and saw it was math, then glanced at the clock. They had just started? She felt like she'd been sitting here for ages. She glanced at the board and clock again. The math had changed. The clock was an hour ahead. She looked around, and there were totally different students in the classroom. "Lydia!" the teacher said forcefully. Lydia jumped. The teacher stood over her with a hand on her back. "Yes, here?" Lydia said uncertainly. "Right, yes, you're here, but—" The teacher paused. "Why are you still here? You're in Juan's seat. This is pre-algebra. I've been trying to get your attention for 10 minutes. She looked around again. Every single person in the classroom was staring at her, and every single one was very obviously a freshman. A few of the kids were stifling giggles. Juan stood near the teacher, looking uncomfortable. "Oh, sorry." Lydia stood and swept her things into her backpack as quickly as she could. "Are you all right?" the teacher asked in a low voice. "Why don't you go to the nurse's office?" No, I'm fine." Lydia hurriedly zipped her bag and flung it over her shoulder. "Sorry, I just slept badly last night. Sorry. She left the classroom as quickly as she could. What the hell is happening? Time seemed all out of whack for her. She swore only a few seconds had passed between when she looked at the clock the first time and the second time. Maybe she should go to the nurse, but she looked at her watch again and realized it was last period, time for English, and then, after that, she was studying with Tyler. She didn't want to miss that. She hurried off to English. The doors at the school were ridiculously heavy and loud, so slipping in quietly was not possible. Tyler and Mr. Wood were already deep in discussion when Lydia walked in. Mr. Wood turned, looking surprised. "Oh, Lydia, welcome. Note?" Lydia shook her head and took her seat. She noted that Tyler looked vaguely disappointed that she'd showed up. The conversation picked up again when another student asked for clarification on what Mr. Wood had been postulating on. Lydia pulled out her book and notebook and absently flipped through it. She stared at the back of Tyler's head as Mr. Wood spoke. She wondered why he had looked so disappointed. Maybe he didn't want to meet with her. Maybe she had pushed too hard. She shook her head. He could have said no. That was allowed. She hadn't been pushy, just nice. Just because she asked nicely didn't mean he had to say yes. He was perfectly capable of saying no thanks. She tried to put it out of her head and focus on the class. The bell rang shrilly, and Lydia already had her stuff tucked into her backpack. Tyler slowly packed up his stuff, then turned around. Hey, Lydia smiled, but was sure it didn't reach her exhausted eyes. Ready for some study time? Yeah, Tyler said. You look kind of tired. Are you sure you want to do this today? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Lydia stifled a yawn. It's okay, we can postpone. It might be better if you're not feeling up to it. Tyler stood and shouldered his backpack. Lydia's heart sank. He was trying to get out of it. I'm fine. Just didn't get too much sleep last night. Lydia smiled again. Tyler smiled a bit wearily. Well, okay. He paused. My mom said I should get out of the house anyway. He made his way out of the classroom and started towards the library. Lydia was close behind him. Oh, do you not go out much? Lydia asked. Not anymore, not really, Tyler said. Lydia walked beside him. That's okay, we're not really going out anyway. We're going to the library to study, Lydia said lightly. Yeah, true. Tyler smiled a little. They walked in silence for a bit, and Lydia stifled another yawn. So you just don't get invited out much, or you prefer to stay at home? Lydia asked. Tyler shrugged. I get invited out. That Michelle girl, I think I've seen you hanging out with her. Lydia felt a tickle in her stomach. He had noticed her after all. She thought he was totally invisible to him. She keeps inviting me out, but more like dates, I guess. She's been really persistent for months. Why don't you go? Lydia asked. I just don't want to. She's not very nice anyway. I prefer people to be kind. He shrugged again. Yeah, she hasn't given me the warmest welcome, Lydia said, laughing a little. She doesn't give anyone a warm welcome, Tyler joked. He pulled the door to the library open and stood to the side to let Lydia go first. Thanks, Lydia said. Sure thing, Tyler replied. They walked into the fluorescent lighting of the school library. It had a familiar feeling. The shelves of books, librarian's desk, checkout counter, the read posters on the walls, mostly empty tables. It all resembled the school library Lydia had left behind, except for one small difference. At one of the tables sat Michelle, next to a stack of books with a laptop open in front of her. She glanced up at the sound of the doors opening. Well, speak of the devil, Tyler muttered. Lydia gave a little wave and a smile. Michelle went back to typing on her laptop. The tables were all grouped together at the front of the library, so avoiding Michelle while they studied would be impossible. Tyler selected the table farthest from her and sat at the far end of it. I think this is the best we can do, he said as Lydia sat down. Yeah, I regret mentioning this to her. Lydia said the words before she could think about them. Oh, so you told your friends about this, huh? Tyler seemed to be relaxing as the time passed. He was joking more and generally being more friendly. Well, we ride the bus together, so I didn't want them to wait for me and miss the bus, Lydia sputtered. Her ears burned, and she adjusted her hair, hoping they were covered. Sure, Tyler winked. They heard a huff from Michelle's table. Lydia rolled her eyes and pulled out their books. Reading through their chapter and answering the questions on the sheet Mr. Wood had given them for homework went by much more quickly with Tyler's help. Even though she was exhausted, sitting on a hard wooden chair across from a cute boy made it difficult to fall asleep and have creepy dreams. She tried to put those things out of her mind. She wasn't at home, she was here in the library. Live in the now. They finished their work in about an hour, and Lydia began to pull out her math homework. Whoa, is that calculus? Tyler asked. Lydia nodded. Wow, you must be really smart with that stuff. I'm still in Algebra 1. Really? Aren't you a junior? Lydia asked. Well, yeah, but math has never really been my strongest subject. I'm more of a literature guy. He paused. I know. I'm going to make bank when I grow up. Lydia laughed quietly. I could help you. I mean, you just help me a lot. Obviously, I'm not great with all the lit stuff. I only read to do math. Lydia smiled. Tyler looked at the clock and thought for a few minutes. Yeah, why not? What harm could it possibly do? Tyler said. Let me text my mom. I told her an hour. Thought you wouldn't like me much, huh? Lydia joked. Tyler grinned and shrugged as he pulled out his phone and texted his mom. After he put his phone away, he pulled out his textbook and opened to his assignment. For a while they worked across the table, but that proved more difficult with math. Why don't you come over here? Tyler pulled out the chair next to him. That should make it easier. Lydia obliged, and they heard another huff from the table occupied by Michelle. They worked for about 15 more minutes when they heard a buzzing. It was obviously a phone set to vibrate. "Hi, Mom," Michelle said quietly. There was a pause. "Yeah, I know. But I told her I wasn't coming." "Why?" "Why? I told you I needed to study at the library today." "Well, not till next week, but... Fine. Yes, I know. Okay, God, I'll come home. No, I can walk. It isn't that far." She heaved a huge sigh. "All right, I'll meet you out front in 10 minutes. She dropped her phone on the table and cursed under her breath. "Michelle," the librarian said, cutting into the quiet, "please keep it down. No phone calls in the library, all right?" "Yeah, sorry. I have to go anyway." Michelle angrily put her stuff away and huffed out of the library. Lydia stifled a laugh and went back to helping Tyler with his math.